Today's episode of Vice Versa, we're talking about the big changes to Tesla's Powerwall, Toyota and Subaru announcing an EV SUV, FIA's electric GT 700 kilowatt charging, talk about fast charging, and much more. And as usual, I'm joined by the guy who puts bit into bit, Ricky Roy. How you doing, Ricky?
Doing good, Matt. How you doing? How's your week so far?
It's been going well. It's been going very well. I released a video this week on, solid-state batteries and when they're actually going to arrive. And
yeah,
big question mark still on that, but it was a fun video to do.
Yeah,
how about you? How's
the
your
views
week?
the views have been good, so clearly people are waiting for that news. And does that mean Toyota's going to make an electric vehicle? Maybe we'll talk about that. I don't know. I don't have a video yet this week. I might publish one tomorrow. It might have to wait till next week. But I'm finding it hard to hit that 1 week cadence at this point. But hopefully,
But you've
the
been
next
killing
couple
it.
of months,
Yeah,
next couple of months, hopefully I can start to,
Yeah, your videos have been really good. So if people aren't watching them, get over to his channel, start watching his videos.
I appreciate that. All right, so shall we get started?
Yes, let's go.
The first story is something we were just joking about. We've kind of been joking that Toyota's sitting on their hands until solid-state batteries, which I guess was not true because they have revealed the electric SUV. It's a concept at this point, but I think this is going to be what it looks like. And the reason I say it is because it looks a lot like their RAV4. So it has what I perceive as something that of some DNA, that has some Toyota DNA into it. And what they've done is they've taken a playbook that they out of their own playbook. They've done this in the past, working with Subaru on the BRZ, which was a little two-door coupe for Subaru, and the FRS for Toyota, which I think became the A86 after the Scion brand was shut down. But the idea was, when you build a coupe, do people want coupes? Toyota sells a ton of crossovers and Corollas, and they weren't really sure if they should go spend $1 billion building out a new coupe, so they partnered, shared the cost with Subaru, and as a result, they both got to get a car out of it. Then they did the same thing with the Supra with BMW, so they're basically in this world where if it isn't like core meat and potatoes, they're going to go work with another company on it. And this is the same thing again, because now they're announcing a partnership with Subaru. And here's the vehicle. I think it looks great. Has a little bit of like Cadillac Lyric in the back, maybe, in the taillight section. But looks like a RAV4, which is a good thing. The new RAV4s are quite good looking. This is built on their new platform. They're calling it the eTNGA platform. And from what it sounds like, they're going to be working with Subaru on something that's going to be foundationally built to be electric, which is all good news. The funny thing here is the naming convention, which I think is a little bit funny. It's called the Toyota BZ4X, and that's a kind of a terrible name, actually. It's kind of a mouthful. Sounds like a printer or like a refrigerator model number, but but what it stands for is Beyond Zero 4X, so Beyond Zero. And the reason I was reading an article, not this one, that they're calling it that is because they want to be able to continue to call their plug-in hybrids and their other kind of sillier things zero emissions or like partial zero or zero. So this is Beyond Zero because it's electric, apparently. So
Okay.
little interesting, but hey, look, they're doing this. To me, it still seems to be a very pragmatic approach. Toyota does not seem fully convinced of the electric vehicle future. So they're doing the same thing they did with their sports coupes, which, Matt, sports coupes are dying off. They don't sell very much anymore. No one's really buying them. So rather than spend $1 billion on a new Celica or Supra, which is what they were known for in the 80s and 90s, partner up with Subaru. So that's what they're doing again. But good news, I guess. What do you think?
I would say it's good news. And on top of that, I think it's a good-looking car. I thought it's a very sleek outside. I like the interior is very traditional looking, but still it's a nice-looking car. Yay was my first reaction when I finally saw hey, they're finally showing us something that they're doing. And the fact that they're also saying that this is the first of 7, what was it, by 2025. So
Right.
hopefully there's going to be more to come from this. But again, for me, the thing I really liked was just the look of it and the fact that they're even just announcing anything at all.
Yeah, and they are. We don't really know too much about timing, but it will come to North America, which is great. Clearly, looking at the car, that car is for Americans. Like, that's exactly the kind of car that sells really well here. And details are still kind of sparse as far as what we'll know in terms of range and everything else. But we know they're doing it. We know they're Toyota. they're going to do it, and it should be pretty compelling. Hopefully it's not like some 110-mile range thing or something, which would be goofy. But I guess they're not the rumors we talked about previously with Tesla. Maybe that's not going to happen then. Maybe it was just or maybe they're going to do another model with that. I did mention that they do have a partnership with Subaru for one sports car, and then they have a partnership with BMW for another.
Yep.
When you kind of share platform technology, that's kind of the joy, is you're not really like beholden, or all your eggs aren't in one basket like they are for GM and VW. But we shall see. But it is good news. I think it's a good looking car, and there are people, and you probably know people like this as well, who will not buy an electric vehicle until name brands that they trust. So for
Yes.
me, when it comes to trust, Honda and Toyota like spring out above all the rest. I know a lot of people who wouldn't buy any car unless it was built by those companies. So this is good for people who are open to the idea but want to see something about tradition from a company that they've had experiences with before.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, I know people that weren't buying EVs until Ford came out with the Mustang Mach-E. And there's definitely going to be people I know that will be the same way with Toyota. So it's nice to see them finally joining in, and we'll start to see more people joining the EV kind of family, which should be good. So the next story is Tesla creates a new team to accelerate the use of the materials in their products. And they've already had a cross-functional team that does this work that's been spanning between Tesla and SpaceX. And it was led by Charles Kuhlman, I think is his name. They developed things like the new aluminum alloys that were used in the Starship and the Cybertruck, the upcoming Cybertruck. But this is a new team that's specifically for Tesla, and it's being led by a man named David Nelson. And in the job postings, this is where the article came from, was job postings that were put up on LinkedIn. And he put posts up that said, "This is a new team where I get to build from scratch. It's a chance to do advanced development with world-class material scientists and product design teams. If you're a broadly talented designer or engineer, please take a look at this job posting and apply. As a design engineer on the team, you will bridge the gap between material science and part design. That can mean many different things depending on the material or process, and on any given day, you might design a prototype, tooling to make a trial part, work with vendors to perfect a process, perform large design space studies, and more." So most companies have material scientists like this on board. I mean, Apple has a huge material science team. Most companies like that do. And this is really kind of cool because this is specifically just for Tesla, where, as I mentioned before, it was more of a cross-functional thing between SpaceX and Tesla. So there's a lot of cool things that this could bring about. What's your take on this?
Yeah, and Charles Kuhlman is actually from Apple. He was part of Apple's alloy team. So
Yep.
again, just that kind of robbing each other of all their tech talent. It's a really fascinating time to be alive and to be really good at what you do. The Cybertruck to me kind of symbolizes the intersection of all this stuff, because there's going to be stainless steel, which they'll share with SpaceX and Starship. So then there's going to be a lot of consideration around. In my Starship video, people always asked, how do you deal with shielding from radiation and stuff? So is there something in terms of like the strength? Is there something they can incorporate with that? And all that benefit means you can make this stainless steel at volume for both vehicles, the Starship and for the Cybertruck. And also we talked about last week, when you're talking about the giga casting machines, when you're going to have huge casting machines that you're going to build entire rear ends of vehicles from, you need to have special alloys of aluminum, which they're going to have. That way you don't have to do a heat treat afterward. So there just seems to be this focus on material science that maybe other car companies don't really care about. They kind of go, what's the latest strength? Okay, great, we'll take that. We'll put it into this form, and there we go. And it feels like Tesla just keeps reimagining and rethinking from the ground up. So really fascinating stuff. To me, material science was always one of those classes in college that was fascinating. There's just so much to it. And it sounds like a lot of really good breakthroughs will happen as a result of this. So really excited to see what comes up next. And what will be the next thing that they revolutionize? I'm not sure, but I'm sure we'll hear more when they do.
Oh, yeah. So next up. You ready?
All right. So the next one almost made Mr. Farrell take a double take. The FIA, which is the Fédération Internationale des Automobiles, FIA, they've announced that they're going to establish a 700 kilowatt charging standard as a part of their race regulations, which, I will say this is really important stuff, because a lot of the cutting edge things that we get in our consumer automobiles comes from race divisions of cars. If you remember, like VTEC and Vanos from BMW's cars, some of this really cool cutting edge stuff happens on the racetrack and then kind of fizzles down to their more common cars. But they did some. I think they said a little back of the napkin math. 60% of the battery capacity, which is 87 kilowatt hours, is about 52 kilowatt hours, and at 700 kilowatts of charging rate, that is a charge in 4.5 minutes, which honestly, when you factor in putting your credit card information and stuff, that's less than pumping gasoline. So if this were to happen, that's officially the end of that argument about charging speed. But you can imagine the infrastructure you would need to support 700 kilowatt charging per endpoint. And if you have a station or stalls where there's 20 cars, that could get pretty intense. On the racetrack, obviously, they're going to be able to handle that. But really cool. And I think the excitement for a future where we have electric racing series. Imagine if it wasn't just kind of like for a smaller niche audience who like sustainability, but imagine if like F1 people were watching electric cars. Because I was reading a story this week that Lamborghini is giving up on the dream of getting better and better 0-60 times. Basically, they're saying, forget that. We know we're never going to beat EVs on that front. We're going to go after handling. It's like, yeah, it sounds like you get the message that you're not going to be able to compete. And eventually, when you have this kind of charging and you have this kind of capacity, that will mean pretty much the end of all that sound and internal combustion engine racing, which will be hard for some people. But I really think this, I'm not sure how they're doing it. They didn't really get into the details about like how are they cooling it? Is there special chemistries involved? But really cool. 700 kilowatts sounds pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, my first reaction when I read this was it reminded me a little bit, it's going to be a weird connection, but like video games. It's like when it comes to personal computers, video games really pushed the boundaries so far that new graphics cards are always trying to one-up each other, and they really push the industry forward. So video games are kind of like the trickle down of technology into broader consumer electronics. And it's like, this feels the same way to me. It's like, this is such a niche little thing. But eventually, if this tech really starts to work out well, it's like I could see this slowly trickling out broader through the industry. So hopefully at some point we'll see 700 kilowatt charging, at mega chargers and stuff around the world. But it's like, it's going to be a while before we get there. The one part of this that confused me was it's still 4 minutes to charge your car up, and that's to the 60% range they talked about in the article for these cars. That's a pretty long pit stop for a race to pull over and charge up for 4 minutes.
Yeah, it sounds great for us, especially if you road trip and you need 30 or 40 minutes to charge. But that is still a long pit stop. Those F1 pit stops, it's like, here's 50 gallons of gasoline, 4 tires, you're off, in like 25 seconds or less. So yeah, it is still a little more of a, maybe they can have a nice casual, leisurely stretch. I don't know.
Get a cup
It
of
is a little
coffee.
bit of a retraining. By the way, our viewers, so Bong Hollywood mentions ABS, anti-lock brakes, comes from F1, and hybrid systems in general come from F1. So
There you go.
those are the kinds of things that happen when money is not enough. That's really what it comes down to, which is what racing is.
That's what I thought about video games. Is like people buying the RTX 3090 cars, which are really expensive. In
Right.
4 or 5 years, that technology is going to be $150. That's going to be just slapped into every computer that's made. So it's the early adopters who spend all the money, help to push things forward and make it cheaper in the long run for everybody else. So it's going to be neat to see how this plays out over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you ready for the next story?
Yeah.
Okay. So next up is a little bit of a kind of, there's 2 stories that kind of go back to back for this. But the first story is, this is the last week to get Tesla Solar without a Powerwall. And not even just that, it's the last time you can get a Powerwall without solar. Yeah, actually, that's already gone though. But right now, it's what they're doing.
Right.
This is a very kind of controversial thing, and I've got so many thoughts on this. Because basically at this point, starting next week, if you want to get solar or a Powerwall, you have to get them together. They're going to be a bundled product no matter what. Which, anyway, Elon tweeted about this saying, starting next week, Tesla solar panels and solar roof will only be sold as an integrated product with Tesla Powerwall battery. Solar power will be fed exclusively to the Powerwall. Powerwall will interface only between the utility meter and a house main breaker panel, enabling super simple install and a seamless whole house backup during utility dropouts. And part of the reason for this is where it's kind of like it's all speculation because there's still not enough they didn't really explain why they're doing this. So one aspect could be for this, like you mentioned, simpler installs, which could in theory make it cheaper. But that seems questionable to me because depending on where you are in the country, the economics for a battery system don't make sense. So for those areas of the country now, if you want to get Tesla as your brand for solar, your cost just went up dramatically because a battery is going to come with it, whether you want it or not, which is really frustrating. And then there's many places where batteries make sense with or without solar. Like for me, I already had an LG solar panel system on my house and I added Tesla Powerwall to it. It's like, and then there's also places where if you live with time of use rates and you don't qualify for solar, you could still get a battery and then get financial benefit of having that battery system without solar. So by the fact that they're putting this together, it raises a couple of questions. Are they basically trying to build a moat around their business by linking these two things together? Because the Powerwall is very popular, and by pulling it in like this, it creates a system where it's like an Apple ecosystem. They're creating an ecosystem that you have to buy into, and if you don't want the whole package, tough luck. I know Elon's talked about moats and not being a fan of moats, so that doesn't seem to jive with me, and I hope that's not the case. The other question was, are they battery constrained? Is this a way to try to basically dial back how many Powerwalls they have to supply because they know this is going to reduce demand by doing this? So if they're cell constrained, this is a way to get around that and reduce the wait times for Powerwalls. Or are they trying to increase the size and scope of their virtual power plant system because they're bundling batteries with every installation now that in theory could increase the number of batteries that will be integrated among all the cities where they're selling and installing solar, which could make larger virtual power plant systems. And then the last thought I had was, or is this kind of a big middle finger to the utilities? Because it's like part of the rationale was it's going to be easier to install, which means you have to do less things with the utility to make it work because they're not going to have to worry about the overproduction of solar entering the grid system because the Powerwall is going to be managing it all. So maybe it's a way to kind of like cut the utilities out of this equation completely. So it's the fact that there's not a lot of explanation around this. The end result for the customer experience is the part that's driving me nuts with this change because there are so many customers that just want the Powerwall and there's so many customers that just want the solar, and putting them together is creating an economic mess for a customer choice. And if I was in the market for solar, this would just take Tesla off the equation for me because in my area, the equation for batteries is less. It's not as great as it is in California, like where you are. You have time of use rates, so it's almost a no-brainer. But in some areas of the country, it's just not. What's your take on this?
It was really, I think you broke that down from all the different perspectives. It's so funny. When I was talking with installers, I work with a company called DroneQuote, who they're some of my friends who started a company, and they kind of reversed the process of buying solar to go, look, why don't you call us up? We'll do a little drone survey. You don't talk to anybody, and then we'll send this information, and you'll get quotes, and then you can go from there. You don't deal with salespeople. Solar salespeople are the worst. Like nothing will make you not want to go solar like dealing with a solar salesperson. The few I've spoken with, it almost came to blows. I felt like they didn't even know as much as I did about solar, and they're telling me all kinds of stuff. So I was asking them, what happens now when Tesla is going to eat your lunch for $2 a watt, which at that time in California, the prices were probably closer to $3 a watt, which means who's going to buy solar from anybody not named Tesla? So to me, in a way, this is a relief for some of those companies, right? Because now there's a lot of solar jobs out there, and there are people who have capacity. And don't forget that now what Tesla's done is they have married their Powerwall shortage with solar. There were panels ready to be bought that they could have bought and sold. Now they won't because they're stuck with Powerwall output. They've basically married those two together for better or for worse. To your point about the moat, which I did not think they were about, It does appear that they now want to do that, which is weird for the solar business because you're not doing your solar business any favors. And Powerwall sales were never huge because you never had enough output anyway. But I think this is actually kind of a win for solar installers because there's a there's no shortage of solar panels. Like the level of commoditization for the solar panel is massive. There's just so many of them out there. And there's a lot of green new jobs. In fact, I think you mentioned this. A lot of the new jobs being created in the economy that were, lost to, like as we've lost coal jobs and other jobs have been green jobs in things like solar panel installation. So I was kind of thinking if Tesla keeps lowering the price like they are, that'll make it tough to compete. But in a way, I think they might be breathing a sigh of relief. And as far as Tesla's plan here, I really don't know what their plan is. To your point, the microgrid, or somebody in the comment section mentioned a microgrid. Maybe you want to do, virtual power plants. That might be where they're headed, meaning, hey, if we're going to take the investment to put up solar on your house, really our end game is that for 10 years we could, make some sort of a service fee while we make you money or something. I don't know. Interesting.
It's there. What's been going on in the Tesla energy side of the business, specifically for the consumers, not the mega pack stuff, it's been giving me whiplash over the past few weeks. Like it's like I can't make heads or tails as to why they're making the changes they're making. It's really like with the solar roof, now with the solar and the Tesla Powerwall stuff going on. It's like I'm just confused as to what their game plan is because it's not clear yet. And I think they honestly need a presentation where they can walk us through of like, here's our plan for the next 5 years for Tesla energy. They need to kind of walk us through that because right now it's looking really slapdash and odd to me. So hopefully,
one thing too, I think you're right. The one thing that I think they probably do get by combining these is maybe a little more margin. So
yeah,
if we factor like, $100 per kilowatt hour, the Powerwall has like, let's say like $1,500 worth of batteries. There's other components in there as well, but there's probably a healthy margin on that product. Solar though, especially because they were undercutting the market so much by selling it for $2 a watt, they're probably making no money on that, or very little margins on that. And it's like, then why bother? You make good margins on everything else. You're making 20% on every Model 3 and Y. Why would you want to get into a low margin, high volume business and that has huge ramifications in terms of needing service people and roofers and that's really where they suffer. We talked about this last week. It's not core to what you're good at, and it's low margin. I never actually understood that actually by getting so cheap. But now with the Powerwall, suddenly the prices are a little more inflated. There's a little more meat on those bones for them to make some money. But yeah, I think this one, I'm sure this will probably dominate. It already is dominating the comment section. But at the Q&A portion, I'm curious what everyone thinks about this and if they have any more information. But I think this will be one that we revisit in the next couple of weeks or so.
Yeah. The second story that's it's funny. It's like, I don't understand what they're doing here, but at the same time, this next story, Tesla is unlocking Powerwall 2 with more power through a software update. This is one of those where we talk about why we love our Teslas and you get the overnight software updates in your car and suddenly it goes faster. They're doing that with the Powerwall now. And they're increasing the power output by up to 50% depending on what year your Powerwall is created in, because clearly they've made changes over the years. But up to a 50% increase in power output is it's kind of nuts. Because I mean, it's like right now, a Powerwall, it's 5 kilowatts continuous output, 7 kilowatts peak. But when you're talking about up to 50%, now you're talking about maybe around 7 kilowatts continuous and maybe 8 or 9 peak. It's almost like having 2 Powerwalls. That's how much they're kind of increasing this in a way. And I have one Powerwall and it's not quite enough to cover me. And if this software update comes out and gives me that 50% increase, now my Powerwall can cover everything in my house, aside from me charging an EV at the same time. So where I was worried about a blackout and my Powerwall like not be able to handle everything, well, those days are gone now. I won't have to worry about it. That's just kind of insane. What's your take on this?
The only caveat I will say for you, Mr. Farrell, in the cold, that might not ring true. So I think what they'll probably do is they're going to have some system where the max output is going to be a function of your conditions.
Temperature.
The other thing too is when they did the critical load panel for you, the circuits in your house that would be backed up if the power went down, things like your air conditioning were not backed up, right?
I don't have a critical load panel
So your entire house is backed up?
off of one
Wow.
battery, which is why it's like if
Yeah.
the power went out, I would have to make sure certain things don't come on because I could overload the
You
battery.
could overload it. Okay.
Right. But with
Got it.
this update, it reduces that risk.
Well, the big things, like if you have a double oven, that's pretty big. The bigger than that would be like an air conditioning when the compressor of the air conditioner kicks on. So for that, you're not gonna have to worry about having it too cold, which is when they'll probably throttle the power output down. That won't be a problem when it's air conditioning season, right? So
Yep.
this will really help you. For us, since I have a critical load panel, I would have to pay somebody to come and move my air conditioning
Change it.
over now, because if this happened, I could run my air conditioning. I wouldn't want to, because you would deplete a Powerwall in about 2 hours.
Yeah.
My air conditioning is using about 4,000 watts, 4 kilowatts. So you deplete a Powerwall really quick. And that's not the point. Like if the power is out, you got to suffer a little. You got to buckle down and turn the fans on and keep the refrigerators running, right? So, but it's just so cool to think about. So think about this. A couple years go by, and now we're hearing about this, right? So imagine that they have the telemetry data, the analytics, the markers that they're tracking, and we're all customers. They've been watching us. They know the peak outputs, and 5,000 kilowatts is already a ton. It could technically power my air conditioning today. It was so close to the edge they didn't include it. And let's say there's some measure, okay, a year goes by and we're going to charge it to full and measure the voltage and see the capacity, or there's some internal way that they were checking, and they were finding, yeah, we had a safety factor that was way conservative just to make sure the batteries are preserved, and it's happening. The batteries are lasting really well. We think we can easily cover the 10-year warranty on it. So let's go. Let's ratchet up the output. I mean, think about a company that operates like that. That is refreshing, and
Yep.
I hope every company learns from how Tesla does stuff. They make a product that they could just over the air update, and it's not just little things like a new feature. We're talking like the max power output, which requires the hardware to be in place for that as well. So incredible, such a cool story.
It also shows how safe they were playing it in the beginning. It's like they wanted to make sure this battery was the safest it could be, so they played conservative with what power it could do. And after enough data comes in, they realize, hey, we could jack this up and it's still perfectly safe. That's really cool. So next story. It's all you.
Yes, the last story of the afternoon is one that we probably should talk more about on this show. NASA picks SpaceX to land the next Americans on the moon. So this is a picture of the lunar lander. I have a picture down here from Everyday Astronaut. He's got some really nice details about this, but this is the Starship lunar equivalent. So you can see how there's some different variants out there, and this would be the one that will take us to the moon. What's interesting is it has no fins, because the moon pretty much has no atmosphere. There's no air. There's nothing to have flight control surfaces for. So that's the shape it takes. And you got to love everything about this. Is just such a cool story, right? Artemis is the name of the program that NASA has undertaken. Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. So it's just a perfect name. And there's even a better connection, because as part of the first few astronauts that go to the moon now in the 21st century, one of them will be a woman. So it's like everything's coming full circle, and I just find this story wildly fascinating. So the way this would work is NASA would still be getting to space with their SLS, their Space Launch System, which is a rocket system that was kind of a hodgepodge, a blend of a lot of different things that they had laying around, pretty much. It was a low-cost approach to building a new rocket launch system. And it'll take 4 people on board the Orion spacecraft, at which point they will transfer to the HLS, the Human Landing System, and head over to the moon. It sounds straight up like science fiction, until you remember we've already done this before at a time when calculators were the size of a room. So yeah, we should be able to pull this off, and it's amazing. It's funny. Part of why I think space is amazing for me is a lot of the comments I've gotten on my Starship video. I think people are pessimistic just in general about life. Like, oh, this is not going to happen. And I'm thinking, you're going to be shocked. If this is going to happen, it's going to happen really quickly in the next
Yes, it
couple of
is.
years. It's going to be amazing, right? What's shocking about this too, the firm fixed price approach of how they contracted this
Yeah.
is less than $3 billion, which is not a lot of money considering that the original Apollo program, I think it was well north of $200 billion, adjusted for inflation and everything else. So it's wildly efficient as well. And that's why SpaceX was chosen, because they are approaching it from this perspective, right? Every flight test that you've seen so far, SN10 and 11, well, all those lessons learned are going to eventually make their way to lunar lander because they kind of share the same platform. So this is where the SpaceX's advantages are going to really shine in the next 21st century space race, if you will. And I just love this story. I'm glad my kids are watching these events as they happen. It's hard to explain to them, like when they get scrubbed for like bad weather. And my son's like, "What have I been doing for the last hour?" But short of that,
Yeah.
it's wildly inspirational, and I love that. That's just something I think we all need more of.
Well, the fact that SpaceX is driving the cost of going to space down so far, the article even mentioned how SpaceX had the lowest bid by a wide margin. Like it really just came down to money. It was the ultimate decision maker for NASA. But also on top of that, they have reusable rockets and that whole aspect of it. So it's like SpaceX really earned this win, and it's so exciting to see how fast the space race is going to be heating up over the next 5 years so much, and over the next decade, it's going to be mind blowing what's going to be going on. And I'm a huge space nerd, and it's going to be really exciting to think I'm going to finally see somebody walking on the moon in my lifetime. I've never seen it. It's like it's going to be so cool to be alive for another human being to get back to the moon again. I
It
can't
was
wait.
the only it was the only cool thing our parents had over us until now.
Until now. Yep. I love this story. Well,
Absolutely.
that was
Let's hope they keep the prices controlled and not like
yeah.
the solar glass roof.
Oh jeez. They upped the contract to $6 billion overnight. Well, that's the last story of the night. So we're going to transition to the Q&A portion of the show. So we'll start combing through all the comments you guys have been making, and start chiming in now if you haven't. And also be sure to hit that like button. We've got 67 likes right now. Let's see how high we can get that.
We got to get 200. 200 is the goal. Let's see what we can do. David says, "Matt, you're a Martian." I think that he means it in the absolute best possible way.
Okay.
Bong Hollywood brings up a point I've thought about a lot. I thought I'm making a video about this. Maybe I will. He says, "Just think of all the flat earthers would say about the next moon landing."
Oh
Um,
jeez.
I've seen some really fun comments about things like, why don't you have wind turbines on cars for free energy? I'm making a video about that. That's coming up. This one about the flat Earth is wildly complicated. I'd have to like sit down for a couple of years to come up with like a model by which a flat Earth would be possible. It'd be wildly complicated compared to like a round Earth. Yeah, it's like totally normal. It's like, of course, it's a bizarre thing. I know it sounds backward now, but just look up at the stars and look at everything else. Why would we be different? Anyway,
And people are bringing up that we should be mentioning that the crewed space launch to the ISS is coming up. It's like tomorrow, isn't it? It's tomorrow?
is it? I have to check.
I thought it was postponed until Friday.
There's been some comments about NASA loves SpaceX. Like the admiration goes both ways. That's
Mm-hmm.
very much true. It isn't a situation where it's like the government versus like private industry. There's a lot of collaboration. NASA has some wildly brilliant people with some of the only experience on Earth, and SpaceX benefits greatly. And it goes the other way around too. SpaceX is not a government bureaucracy. It can actually function, and do things day by day, minute by minute. So to me, this kind of represents a new model of how to think about the great big challenges of the world, kind of a pseudo hybrid private public partnership, and that it could get done. Maybe like high speed rail is possible in America. I don't know. Maybe I'm being optimistic.
Being optimistic there. Oh, and
Thank you so much, Eric.
You see this comment? We've matched colors again.
Have we?
You're in a gray plaid, and I'm just wearing a gray shirt.
Okay, that's a stretch, James. Like a little bit. Big thank you to Eric Kessler for the super chat. We appreciate you, Eric. Is always one of my favorite fans. I look for his comments in all of our videos. Really appreciate you.
He also asked, any news on the Powerwall 3 and better ability to handle Texas-sized grid downs? I haven't heard a peep about any kind of Powerwall 3 rumors at all.
Somebody else mentioned that this might be another move to kind of like just quell the demand or interest. That way they can slowly upgrade. Yeah, Powerwall 3. If that is the case, I think we both have a referral Powerwall from, and I'm hoping that becomes a Powerwall 3 and they take their time because I'm curious about that. Yeah, but I haven't heard much yet. And Tesla's really good about keeping rumors in-house. I don't know how they do it, but they're pretty good. Joshua Smith says, how did Laura Decker circumnavigate the Earth if it's flat? The absurdities go. It's an endless. It just doesn't make any sense. Like even like the gravity's now pulling down this way all the time. What happens to like? It's bizarre. It might make for a fun. Put it like this: imagine being the person defending a flat Earth, and think about the arguments you'd have to make. Wildly fascinating. You'll have a good time.
Your
head might hurt though.
Yeah. Yeah. No Starlink for flat earthers.
Hard to explain that one, isn't it?
Beach Crow.
Oh, and by the way, today's Earth Day. How could we have forgotten that? Happy Earth Day to everybody.
Happy Earth Day.
Hopefully we've all done some small little part. Bong Hollywood asks if you guys are going to do a 6-month to 1-year Powerwall review. Matt, have you done one or are you planning one?
I'm planning one. Yeah.
I am as well.
Yeah. Oh, here's a Rodney Jackson. Considering the price increases in Solar Roof and poor customer service, do you think it's worth it to continue on with the project or pivot and walk away? What's your take?
Yeah. It comes down to schedule. If you're flexible and you're, like, for example, if you're buying, like I have a reservation for a Model Y that I just keep deferring because it doesn't change my life at all. Like if a new car was available or not, I have cars right now, I have a house. But like if your roof is off of your house, which there was a commenter told me that Tesla had come and removed their roof and then suddenly it was, radio silent for a month. I kind of like my roof. I kind of want to have it. So it comes down to schedule and personal preference. Honestly, if you want to just look around local installers, I mentioned Drone Code as a company I work with. There's some other options for sure to at least have options out there. And it comes down to schedule and just personal level of like hassle, I guess you could say. What do you think? What would you do?
If you ask me right now, which he is, it's like my take is I might actually look elsewhere. I'm losing my patience with what they're doing because I'm getting whiplash with all the changes and the price increases. It's like they're not doing a good job with their customer management right now. It makes me very frustrated. So it would come down to what your tolerances are for this kind of whiplash, and if the costs are still within your budget stick with it. But if you need it quickly and you want a little more hand holding and or maybe even a better price because you got a better package deal somewhere else, I would look around. I mean, that's kind of my take is I would definitely look around to get some comparisons.
Well said. There's a great super chat from Chris. Thank you so much for your super chat. We appreciate you. And he asked, do you think this Powerwall pairing with solar is because Tesla is cell constrained? It could be. There's merit to that idea. But to me, it sounds like, but it also means now you're constrained with your solar business,
Yeah.
which there's no constraint there. There are panels for days. And you've been training up a crew, admittedly. So now you're going to be hurting their projects because now everybody, to your point, who wants solar now has to pay another $10,000. You basically added $10,000 to everyone's bill. And for some people who want the emergency preparedness aspect, that sounds great. But for some people where energy prices are fixed all day, you're just adding $10,000 or $12,000, I think it is now, 13, something like that,
Yeah.
to their cost.
My one conspiracy theory to this would be maybe this is a chance to try to drive people more to their Tesla leasing program, where you're basically, where you're not paying up front, you just pay a monthly fee and they put everything on your house. I wonder if this is trying to drive people more towards that product because that's going to look super cheap now compared to having to buy it all up front.
It's interesting. My only question with that model is kind of like the same problem I have with battery swapping, which is, do you really want to have a lot of sunk cost and hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt on people's solar on their roofs and they don't pay? I don't know. It seems like a weird move for again a high margin company, but I'm wondering if anybody else has any insight. But yeah, I'm pretty stuck. Hard to say, I think.
Oh, for Rodney Jackson, who was asking about would you pivot on the roof? My project was planned for mid-June and damaged from a tree falling a year ago. I've been waiting. Yikes.
Oh, Rodney, I'm so sorry, man.
Man, it's like I'd be looking around.
And tell them when you have whatever you owe me, like if I think he mentioned free Powerwall, if there's some stipulation on that, tell them I'm not waiting around for you. When you're ready to install, I expect you guys to come and add it, and I got to move on or something. Like, talk to when you get in touch with somebody over there. It could be hard to nail someone down, but they're good guys over there. So definitely talk to them. And communication is bad. Rodney, you're not the first person to tell us that. So I apologize. That's tough.
Do you want to, Dave asked a question I don't know if you want to touch, but what are your thoughts about the customer complaints in China about poor Tesla build quality? Which, of course, there's also that news of that woman that was arrested at that auto show yelling about Tesla brakes fail. I don't know if you heard about that, but
I actually haven't heard about that. Why don't you start with this one then? Sounds like you have a little more context.
There was this auto show in China where this woman showed up, got up on top of one of the show cars, and was just yelling about Tesla brakes fail because evidently her father's Tesla's brakes failed and he got in an accident and got hurt. And so she's, I think, suing the company and she's been protesting the company. She got arrested, and the controversy was kind of around, well, did Tesla push for her to get arrested? And also, it seems like the story's been blown out of proportion, and there's a whole bunch of kind of FUD about this, where things are getting picked up in the Chinese media, making these things sound worse than they are. It's the same exact complaints we've heard about Tesla here in the United States. Poor build quality, all those kind of things. Same exact reports are starting to spring up over there. But when you actually look at the numbers of like the number of accidents that Teslas have been in, it is one of the best cars in China. So it's like, it's pretty much the same. It's repeating over there.
Yeah.
But the difference is the culture is very different. And the way the Chinese media is very different. So Tesla's having to react to this in a different way. And that's kind of where I think the controversy is kind of springing up is they actually put out a release apologizing about that brake failure. They would have never done that here in the United States. It would have been
Right.
Tesla being belligerent with the press and saying, you don't know what you're talking about. So it's interesting to see how Tesla's already starting to adjust their messaging over there because they kind of have to.
Yeah, yeah, this might be controversial, but I think China holds a lot of people kind of hostage in a lot of ways. They're just such a huge market, and they know it. Like I used to joke with my brother, the number of mentions about like China or features for China in Apple events. This last one wasn't too much, but I remember like a couple years ago, it was like, is this an event for the U.S. or for China? I felt like everything was about, and now emojis in Chinese, and this is Chinese, because Apple knows like they need to sell more phones, and that's the market where they're going after. So it goes for all car makers too. The NBA, there was a story, I think it was 2 years ago now, where the GM of the Rockets came out in favor of Hong Kong, and he said like, I support Hong Kong or something, and he was like forced to apologize. That's absurd. Like this is a country where we have free speech, and this man can't even say that I support Hong Kong, which I personally do as well. And yet, unless you're gonna make me quit, vice versa, which I hope you don't, you can't even have that opinion anymore. So China has such power in this way, and you're right. We've had a couple of issues. I mean, Teslas are wildly safe and brilliant cars, and I think people know that now here after a lot of FUD has been tried and waged and fought. But in China, they're actually announcing and addressing people's concerns, and it's because you don't want to lose that market. And it's already a little bit interesting because China's got really compelling EVs, locally homegrown. So it wouldn't take a lot for them to be like, you know what, Tesla, that Shanghai Gigafactory, we decided we don't want you to have it. That's the kind of the thing. I'm afraid of China because I just don't know exactly what happens. You remember what happened to Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba?
Yes.
Where is he, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to know or hard to say, I guess.
For this specifically, it wasn't the Chinese government that was kind of forcing their hand. It literally was just the public upswell of Tesla FUD. It was getting a little bit out of control, so they kind of had to do it just for a PR reason. So it wasn't that the government was forcing them to do it, but it's a very different culture, and this kind of stuff spreads in a very different way than it does here. It's going to be interesting how this plays out. It's where they kind of rode through it here, and it was tough, but they got through it being Tesla. It's like they're not going to be able to do the same exact playbook there. They have to have a different playbook, and I hope they navigate this because it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, the media is involved, right? So the Chinese media, which, who's in charge of that, you can decide for yourself. But there's a lot of little facets to it. Agreed. It's a tough one, but clearly a hugely important market, and companies bend over backward to appease them. Exactly. Grizzly sounds angry, but I'm trying to follow what he was.
He's angry about my statement about solar, the Tesla solar business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I appreciate your point of view, Grizzly, but my view is not that Tesla's doomed or anything. It's far from that. It's just I just don't like how they're handling their customer relations right now. It could be so much more, so much better.
Grizzly says, watch Fully Charged, the episode that they just did on the BYD. I guess BYD, I don't know if BYD makes cars as well. I think there might be something. But there's a lot of emerging contenders out there. Oh, this is cool. Surviving the Castle. Is that the one I have? Yeah, so Christopher Jones is in the chat, and he sent me a copy of his book. it's behind me, and he's asking if he can send you a copy as well. It's called Mars Mission 1: Surviving the Kessler Effect. Any space fans out there, definitely check it out. Chris is
Cool.
a really cool guy. Absolutely. Um, Rob says you guys getting up to watch Crew 2. Let's see. Sleep is as a father of a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, sleep is a funny thing. We shall see. Eric Kessler says, my guess with the Powerwall 3 is that the 4680 battery cells timing might be the key there. That's interesting, especially if they have a new 4680 with lithium iron phosphate that has longer charge times or something. That's interesting. That's probably the case as well. They're probably um, they're probably working on something. Claudia, my wife, says, sleep, what's that? I have to say thank you to her because she's the one who gets up in the night and lets me sleep. So I'd be a zombie without you. Thank you. Oh, did you see the EQS, the Mercedes reveal, the kind of the production? It's not full production yet, but
Yeah.
it's their flagship kind of, Mercedes, the S class, the electric S class, if you will. What'd you think?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It looks crazy inside. The interior of that car looks like a spaceship with all the stuff
it
that it can
does.
do. But like the look of the car, it's like it's fine. But the interior is just nuts.
The That was one of those cars that I was really hoping they would stick to the prototype, the car show car that they
Yeah.
made, but the the production version seemed to be quite a bit compromised from that, which is a shame because I think if they had just done the the car that they unveiled and showed off, that would have been a big hit. But Mercedes is in the arena, and that's the kind of car they can probably start making first, since there's going to be more higher margins, and they're not going to have to make a million of them like they will with cheaper Mercedes models. So, yeah, agreed. Dusty Green says Mercedes was kind of meh. That's how most people feel, but it is a wildly cool and luxurious car for sure. There's 200 of you guys watching and 100 likes, so we're close, but 200 likes is within our grasp, and it would make my night. We have 7 minutes left.
This is interesting. Jonathan M said, I install solar roofs for Tesla in New Jersey, and I understand the pairing of the Powerwall to the solar roof and raising prices to slow down the demand because here in New Jersey, the wait to get solar roof is 2 years. That's crazy. I understand
So
that
that
with
was
the pairing with the solar roof, but like this is even with just the
agreed.
solar panels. That's the part I don't
Right.
get. It's like I can understand the pairing with the roof, but the cheaper solar panels, there's not a shortage on those.
Exactly.
But man, 2 years. That is wow.
Jose Santin says the EQS is impressive that they got a drag coefficient of 0.2. The the words are on officially. Lucid Motors
Yeah.
had a really low drag coefficient of like 0.22 or something, 0.23. The Model S came out with 0.21. The EQS is apparently 0.2. Slippery little cars.
What I like is like it feels like the horsepower race. Who's got the more horsepower? And now it's like who's got the better drag coefficient?
It's true. I'm curious how much lower it can get. Really, it's pretty incredible. That's a good one. The full self-driving subscription is slated to be unveiled, or at least kind of the prices are supposed to be released next month. Who would get FSD on a monthly subscription basis? Matt has already purchased it. I have not. I'd check it out, see if I liked it, and consider becoming a subscriber.
how much would you pay?
I was really hoping $100 a month, but a lot of people are projecting 200 a month, which my wife is on the chat. Let's see what she says. 200 a month. 200 a month doesn't sound crazy to me, to be honest, especially if, we could take trips and we weren't driving. Um, I would really want it for my Cybertruck. We were talking about getting a fifth wheel or a trailer and doing a little RV adventure next year. And I ran a little poll. Should I get an RV? Should I get a fifth wheel and a pickup truck? Should I wait for the Cybertruck? A couple different options. Just drive the Model 3 and get hotel rooms wherever I go. And the Cybertruck plus trailer was the winner of that poll.
Yeah.
And that would be cool. And if you tell me that you have a car that drives itself as you're driving around the country, that's pretty nice. Because I drove my dad's RV, and it's taxing. Driving a big vehicle is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd get it for that.
Yeah, Bung Hollywood says if it's under $150 a month. That still seems high to me, but that does seem more reasonable.
Yeah.
100, 150.
Until there's competition, they can kind of do what they want.
I would really hope it's kind of like you can duck in and duck out. You know what I
I
mean?
hope so too. No contracts. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's what they were going to do. Dusty Green says, what is selling a house like that has solar and Powerwall? Is it seamless or difficult? And he's using his wife's account, says Katie Green. So it depends on if you own the product or not. If this, like my solar panels are free and clear, they're paid for. So selling my house is as simple as not having them. It's a perk. They're on the roof, no problem. If you go the lease route, some of these kind of companies that do the Sunrun, I think, or companies that do the lease route, they have a lien on your property, which means that when it comes time to sell it, they have to be informed, and you got to make right with them. So that makes things complicated, because then in your negotiations, you have to figure out who's paying for it. And a lot of people who sell homes don't have enough to cover their huge costs. Like some of them get like $40,000, $50,000 systems, which to me is crazy. But when they sell their house, they have to make it right. So they'll figure out like, okay, when we sell the house in escrow, we'll take this money out at that point, and it gets complicated. So that's why I've always been a fan of just buy your panels, make it part of your house like everything else. You don't lease your bathrooms and stuff. And that's just my personal take on it.
I'm in the same boat. It's like mine's almost paid for. And if we move in the next couple of year or two, it's like it'll be a clean slate for me. There won't be any issues flipping it over to a new owner. Hey, Mike. Mike just asked the question. The Mustang Mach-E was the top 2021 top safety pick. It's outperforming Ford's own range estimates. Any comment on Mach-E's prospects? And I like the way you say that, Mike, because Mike owns a Ford Mach-E. He's a very proud owner of that. I think it's got amazing prospects. One of the things, like, Tesla got knocked a little bit recently because their range estimates were slightly under what their real world data was showing. Most other car manufacturers have been very conservative, and they've been blowing past their estimates. And Ford's one of those, which is kind of on the higher side for what they have estimated. I think there's a lot of pent up demand, I think, for that car, and it's getting a lot of good buzz. I think it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, I had one for a couple of days in the red color. I thought it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous car. And we got tons of attention. And I have a performance Model 3. No one cares. I'm like invisible. I always mention. I got it in white for that reason. I didn't want to get attention, but it just blends in. There's a lot of them. But the Ford, we were at a Starbucks or a In-N-Out, and people were like honking their horns and waving. There was so much energy about the car. So really, really cool car. And I like that Ford underrated the range. I think Tesla could maybe do the same thing. It's better to delight than it is to say you're going to get 340 miles, and I never even get. My car was supposed to get 310, and I think I've gotten like 278 one time, something like that. Not even close. So that's a good move, and it's a good look for Ford. And the safety, we talked about this before. It isn't like, Tesla's got some really great things they do to make their cars safe, but electric vehicles are inherently more safe. That's what we have to remember. when you don't have a big piece of metal in the front of your car that's going to get crumpled into your legs when there's a frontal crash, that you don't have all this high center of gravity. Your batteries are on the ground, and even though the Ford Mach-E, is a crossover and it rides a little bit higher, the center of gravity is shockingly low. Compare that to like a Ford Escape, which is probably the closest competitor, and take the wheel and just like do a little slalom on the road with it. The two cars, you'll feel why electric vehicles are superior. So was it Mike you said?
Yeah, Mike. Yep.
Congrats, Mike, on a really awesome purchase. And thanks for showing support for companies like Ford to make EVs, because they need to see that it's a good move. Otherwise, they won't do it.
It's actually time for us to call it a night. Any other questions you want to try to field before we jump?
No, we appreciate you guys. Thank you for joining. It's incredible how quickly an hour flies by.
Yeah, no kidding. So thanks everybody for watching. And as usual, we're live every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And you can always listen to us on the podcast version at viceversa.show. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.